Now, after all of these other points, the Holocaust and religious wars and slaves and gladiators and public executions, I have one more question for you, and that is, should we ignore our instincts or justify them? Ultimately, this is human nature, right? This is something that we have inside us that we crave. We have a certain appetite for it. Certainly, it could be justified, right? Or are you on the side that it's inappropriate? It's not okay. Whether we want it or not, whether we want to see the inappropriate, it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't justify it in the end. Some people would replace the word ignore with overcome. And our instincts could be replaced with the natural man, if that sounds familiar, right? So which side are you on? Do we ignore or do we justify? Now, a few more quotes from the article itself. Remember the story quoted a little while ago from Plato? Plato's Socrates describes how our reason may be overwhelmed by an unworthy desire which drives the self to become angry with a part of its nature. Back to that do we ignore or justify argument. It's a struggle between man versus himself. It's part of our nature to want to have this desire, and yet we know that it's an unworthy desire, and when we fall to any unworthy desire, we become angry with ourselves. So we have this constant internal struggle. But we have an appetite for sights of degradation and pain and mutilation. It's terrible. But is it true? Even if you set yourself aside and say that you don't have that appetite. Do you see it in the rest of the world? Is it a majority of people? Is he wrong? Is he right? Do we have this appetite for sights of degradation and pain and mutilation? And another quote, love of mischief, love of cruelty is as natural to human beings as is sympathy. Ugh, doesn't that sound terrible? We like the sympathy part. We want sympathy to be natural to human beings. But is it equally natural to cruelty? That we love to be cruel? Now, you know that most of the world has a problem with bullies. And yet, really, can any one of you listening say that you've never been bullied? And just as much, can anyone say that you've never bullied anyone? You've never been mean to someone? You've never been cruel? Can you say that? Do we have this natural aspect, this nature, that tends to be cruel, that we have to intentionally curb? Is that love of cruelty there? Now we're about to look at some pictures. So brace yourselves, because I might make some of you upset. But you've got to think about some things and really decide, are you off to the side, because this doesn't apply to you and you don't have this nature, this appetite, this love, or are you more in the middle of it than you realize? This is Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world. He was mortal because he was the Son of Mary. He was immortal because he was literally the Son of God. This is what mankind can do to a mortal man. This is what he could do as the Son of God. Yet, this is not the image we want to put everywhere. This is what we want to see. We want to see the pain, the suffering, the agony, the humiliation. Is this a religious statement, or is this really the natural man, the same natural man he told us to overcome? Why is this not the symbol of Christianity? This is how he overcame death. This is how he overcame what mankind could do to him. Yet this hangs around our necks. This is put in windows. This is made into statues and paintings and put everywhere. Tell me, If he had been killed with a gun, would we all wear a gun around our necks? If he had been killed with a knife, would we all wear a knife around our necks? This was the worst that they could come up with at that time. What if instead they had come up with the death of 100 cuts? Would we all then have that picture on our desks? A picture just like the one that caused you to cringe a few moments ago and classify Batil as a freak. Would we all have that same picture? Think of some stories of parental sacrifice that brings tears to your eyes. Those stories about parents whose children need special medical attention or can't afford education, so the parents endure poverty, pain, homelessness, anything to get their child what is needed. They do that so the child will be happy and have the goal, the outcome of the pain. This that we see in this picture, this is the goal of Christ's suffering on the cross. He did that so that he could be resurrected and thereby make it possible for all of us to be resurrected. Of course, we all want those kids to know what their parents went through for them so that they appreciate it. They should know, but would the parents want them to focus on and constantly illustrate their time of greatest pain and humiliation? No. They would want the child to be grateful for the outcome while appreciating the sacrifice that was made. Yet this is not the symbol of Christianity. This is the victory. It is constantly overlooked because we, with all our human nature, would rather see the blood, the pain, and the suffering. This is what we want to see. This is what gives us a sick, erotic sense of pleasure that we twist into calling spirituality, just like Batil called it spirituality to keep the death of 100 cuts on his desk. We actually preach to our children that he lives, that he is there for us, he hears us, he is near us, all while showing them image after image after image of his dead, mutilated body hanging on a weapon of torture. This is just an occasional side note that sometimes we remember to show them. And yet, this is why he did it all. This is where the word gospel or good news comes from. This is what the reference of being saved actually refers to. But to the natural man that we have not overcome, that just isn't good enough. This is what we want. How many times can we crucify him again and again and again? The more blood and the more suffering and the more depiction of that pain, the better. Is this not akin to pornography? Is it not so very similar to the carnal desire that actually drives us to see this as what drives us to see what we typically label as porn? Unthinkable, I know, but if you were to be completely honest with yourself for once, what is the answer? So where does this all leave you? Are you in the same position you thought you were in at the beginning of the lecture? Consider these questions. What is your nature? What is your appetite? What do you justify? What do you appreciate? What do you tolerate? And then, of course, you could ask yourself, why?